Charlie didn't see her at first, not until his horse stopped cold, ears twitching, nostrils flaring toward the broken scrub. That's when he looked down and saw a hand, thin, scraped, curled into the dirt like it had been clawing for water. He slid off the saddle in one smooth motion. She was half hidden behind a gnarled bush, skin streaked with dust and blood, clothes torn, one boot missing. Her lips were cracked, eyes glassy but locked onto him like she might lunge if her bones would let her. Charlie crouched beside her. "You alive?" Her jaw worked, but no words came. He pulled the canteen from his belt, tipped it carefully to her mouth. She took the water, slow and watchful, like an animal unsure if it was being saved or hunted. She didn't ask who he was, didn't thank him either. He didn't blame her. "Name?" he asked. "Anne," she rasped. Nothing more. She tried to sit up, then dropped with a grimace. Charlie caught her before her head hit the rock. Her skin burned against his palm. He looked around, no sign of others. No wagon, no horse. Just a battered woman in the middle of nowhere and the sun bleeding across the hills. "You run from someone?" he asked. Anne didn't answer. That was an answer. Charlie swore under his breath, stood, and pulled her up with him. She didn't weigh much. Whatever had happened, she hadn't eaten in days. He hoisted her onto the saddle in front of him, arm tight around her waist. As they rode into the rising dusk, she leaned back against his chest, not for comfort, but because she couldn't stay upright. She didn't ask where they were going, and Charlie didn't tell her. Because the truth was, he didn't know what the hell he was doing either. Charlie laid her gently on the cot, then stepped back like she might break if he lingered. Anne didn't say a word, didn't ask where she was. She just stared at the ceiling, lips parted, chest rising shallow and slow. He tossed a blanket over her and sat near the wood stove, boots heavy on the floorboards. The only sound in the cabin was the wind outside and the slow ticking of a warped clock. Anne slept with one hand curled near her face, the other still streaked with blood. Charlie watched her through narrowed eyes, the way a man watches a storm that hasn't hit yet. When she finally stirred, it was past midnight. She sat up, dizzy, then scanned the room like she was still on the run. "You're safe here," Charlie said. "I didn't ask," she murmured. He smirked, just a flicker. "Didn't say you did." Anne swung her legs off the cot, standing too fast. Her knees buckled and he caught her again, arms around her before either could think. They locked eyes. Close, too close. Her breath caught, his jaw clenched. For a moment the room got real quiet. Then she stepped back, pulled the flannel tighter around her shoulders. "I don't like owing people." "You don't," he said, even though they both knew that was a lie. He poured her coffee. She took it without thanks, same way she took the water earlier. Charlie studied her as she sipped slow and silent. She was broken, but not beaten, and he couldn't help but wonder, what the hell had she crawled out of? The morning sun crawled through the cracks in the cabin walls, landing on Anne's face like it had no business there. She blinked against it, winced, and sat up slow. Charlie was already up, outside splitting kindling like it had wronged him, shirt clinging to his back, jaw locked. She watched him through the dusty window, eyes unreadable. Inside, the coffee on the stove was burnt black. She poured a cup anyway. Charlie walked in without knocking the dirt off his boots. Their eyes met, and for a beat, neither of them spoke. "You sleep?" he asked. She shrugged. "Enough." He nodded, sat at the table, reached for the coffee. "Looks like hell." "Tastes worse," she said. He cracked the faintest grin. "That's how I know it's working." Anne sat across from him. Her knuckles were raw, her lips still split. But her back was straight now, less broken, more steel. Charlie took a sip, then set his cup down hard. "Someone's gonna come looking for you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Doubt it." "You sure?" "No one looks for what they threw away." He leaned back, studying her face. She met his stare, not flinching. That's when he realized something. She wasn't scared of much, not even him. Whatever had happened to her, it hadn't cracked her, just buried her deeper in herself. And now, she was starting to dig her way out, but he had a nagging feeling in his gut. When she finally did, something ugly was coming with her. Anne was barefoot in the dirt, sleeves rolled, arms elbow-deep in suds by the trough when Charlie stepped out onto the porch. Her hair, still tangled from days of dust and sleep, hung loose over her shoulders. A bar of soap sat near her hip, and a blood-stained flannel shirt floated in the wash bucket. Charlie watched her a beat too long. She looked up and caught him. "Figured I'd earn my stay," she said. He nodded once. "Ain't a hotel." "Good," she muttered, turning back to the bucket. "Don't like people." He didn't answer, just stepped off the porch and grabbed a post-hole digger from beside the barn. They worked in silence. Charlie repairing the west fence line, Anne scrubbing and hanging clothes on a rope between two junipers. She moved like she was used to labor, like she'd had to survive on more than charm. But her eyes? They never stopped moving. She scanned the tree line often, checked the road, listened for more than just birds and wind. Charlie noticed. "You expecting someone?" he asked, casual as he could manage. "No," she said. "Just learn to listen." To what, she didn't say. That night, she set the coffee before him without speaking, then sat across the table again like they were partners in something neither one dared name. Charlie sipped, not looking at her. Anne stared into her cup. Neither of them said it, but both of them knew the truth. You don't act like that unless you're still running from something. And whatever Anne had left behind, it wasn't done with her yet. Charlie sat on the porch, one boot up on the rail, watching the sky bleed orange into night. The cattle were quiet. The wind had finally died down. But in his chest, something still stirred, tight, restless. Anne stepped out without a word, her shadow stretching beside his. She held 2 mugs. Set one beside him. He nodded. She leaned against the rail, arms crossed, staring into the fading light. "You always this quiet?" he asked. "Only when I've got something to say." Charlie smirked. "That's so?" Anne didn't smile back. Talking makes it real. He let the silence stretch, sipping from the mug. It wasn't about the coffee. It was the only thing they could share without it turning into something else. "You miss where you came from?" he asked. She shook her head. Wasn't much to miss. That was all she gave him. But her jaw clenched on the last word like it hurt. He didn't press, didn't have to. There were things a person said in what they didn't say. The stars came out slow, one by one. "You married?" she asked. Charlie's eyes stayed on the horizon. "No." "Why not?" He took too long to answer. "Same reason you ran," he said. "Some things break too deep to fix." Anne looked at him then, really looked. And in the dark between them, something shifted. Not soft, not sweet, but real. Like 2 people who'd both seen hell, and were still deciding if they could live with what crawled out of it. And neither of them said a damn thing more. Charlie noticed it first. Anne was outside feeding the chickens when she froze, her head cocked just slightly toward the ridge beyond the barn. It was quick, maybe 2 seconds, but enough for him to catch it. She kept working after that, moving slower, eyes scanning, shoulders drawn. Charlie leaned against the post by the barn door, arms crossed, pretending to roll a cigarette. He wasn't lighting it, just watching. When she came back in, he stepped aside. "You see something?" he asked. Anne shook her head, too fast. "Just being cautious." He narrowed his eyes. Cautious or hunted? Her jaw tightened. "You got a lot of questions today. You got a lot of silence every day." They stood there, neither blinking. Then Anne walked past him, grabbed a bucket and filled it from the rain barrel. She didn't answer, didn't need to. Her body said enough, the quick glances, the way her back never faced the woods. Charlie didn't push her. But that night, he saddled his horse and rode the fence line twice. Then he rode it again. At the edge of the canyon, he paused, listening. Nothing but wind and dry grass, but the back of his neck prickled. Somewhere out there, something was watching, something patient, and he had the feeling Anne already knew what it was. It was past midnight when Charlie found her in the barn. The storm had passed, but thunder still growled in the distance like a warning. He'd woken to the sound of boots in the gravel, Anne's, and followed without thinking. She was leaning against a support beam, arms folded, moonlight casting silver across her face. A lantern glowed low near the saddle rack. Her hair hung damp over one shoulder. The flannel shirt she wore was open at the collar, just enough to distract a man. "You always wander after dark?" he asked, voice low. Anne didn't look at him. "Couldn't sleep." Charlie nodded, stepped inside, leaned on the opposite beam. The air between them was thick with heat that had nothing to do with the weather. "I never asked you to fix me," she said suddenly. "I never offered," he replied. Silence. Then she turned to face him. "You don't trust me." "Should I?" That hit her. Not hard, just true. She took a slow step toward him. "If I was dangerous, you'd be dead already." Another step. Charlie's jaw clenched. His breath shortened. She stopped just in front of him, inches away. "You gonna keep standing there?" she whispered. "Or are you gonna do something?" For one long second, everything held still. The heat, the breath, the stare. Then Charlie reached for her, fast, but she stepped back just as quick. "Not yet," Anne said, voice husky. "You want it? I want it? But not like this." Charlie swallowed hard. Anne grabbed the lantern and walked out of the barn without another word. And Charlie just stood there, hands shaking, heart racing, like she'd branded something into him that he wouldn't be able to scrape off. The barbershop bell rang behind Sheriff Harlow as he stepped into the general store, boots echoing off the hardwood. A few heads turned. Most didn't. But the man behind the counter gave a nod that meant he had something worth hearing. Harlow leaned in. "You hear about the woman staying with Humphries?" The clerk's mouth twitched. "She don't talk much, but a man came through yesterday, claimed he saw a woman just like her back near Ashwood, said she was with that gang." Harlow said nothing, but his jaw flexed. He folded the sketch from his pocket, rough pencil work, but the cheekbones were close, the eyes too close. "Appreciate it," he said, tucking the paper away. Out at the ranch, Charlie knew something was coming. The horses were restless, the air too still. He felt it like a splinter under the skin. Anne was working the garden row, face flushed from the sun. He watched her for a moment, how she moved like she belonged here, like she wanted to. "You ever heard of Ashwood?" he asked. She froze, just enough for him to notice. "Why?" "Sheriff's asking around. Says someone spotted a woman that looks like you with the gang." Anne set the trowel down slowly. "People see what they want to see." Charlie didn't speak. Not yet. Anne's hands trembled slightly as she wiped sweat from her forehead. "You think I was one of them?" she asked, not looking at him. He didn't answer, and that silence cut deeper than if he had. Anne stood at the edge of the barn, eyes on the hills, shoulders square like she was daring something to come over the rise. Charlie stayed by the corral, arms crossed, letting her feel the weight of his stare. "I didn't ride with them," she said without turning. "Didn't plan to end up in their camp. I didn't even know who they were until it was too late." He waited. "They took me off the road, just past the Yarrow Split. Tied me up, beat me, then figured out I was better bait than prisoner. Said I looked like a preacher's daughter. Her voice cracked on that last word. Charlie shifted, but didn't move closer. And after that? I did what I had to, Anne said. Played dumb, washed their gear, smiled when they said something vile, bought time until that posse came through and tore them apart. She finally turned to face him. That's when I ran. Charlie stared at her, jaw working like he was grinding down something bitter. You still didn't tell me all of it. I told you the truth. Half of it, he muttered. Anne stepped forward. You think I had a choice? You think I wanted to be dragged through the mud and tossed in a tent like a... She stopped herself. Her hands were fists now. Charlie took a long breath. I don't know what to think. That's the difference between you and them, she said, voice low. You still think. Then she walked past him, brushing his shoulder. He didn't stop her, but he watched her the whole damn way. And for the first time, he wasn't sure who he was protecting anymore, her or himself. Anne stayed up late that night, sweeping the same patch of floor over and over like she could scrub the past clean if she tried hard enough. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls, bending and stretching just like the truth between them. Charlie sat at the table, silent, one hand wrapped around a half-empty glass. He hadn't asked her to leave, but he hadn't said she could stay either. You want me gone, she said without looking at him. He didn't answer. She leaned the broom against the wall, crossed her arms. Say it. Charlie looked up. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired, worn thin. Don't want anything I can't trust, he said. And I don't know if that's you. Her face cracked, just a flicker, hurt and hardened all at once. You think I don't carry that same weight? Charlie stood slowly, his boots loud on the plank floor. I think you're still carrying something you're not ready to set down. They were close again, just like in the barn. Tension twisted in the space between them. She stepped forward. So did he. Then she stopped, chest rising sharp with breath. Don't kiss me because you pity me, she said. I don't, he muttered. Then don't kiss me at all, unless you mean it. She walked to the door, paused, then turned her head just enough for him to hear. I've lied to survive. But I never once lied to you. Then she was gone, back out into the dark. And Charlie stood there, jaw tight, wondering what kind of man keeps letting someone walk away, just because he's scared to make them stay. Charlie didn't open it right away. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for hours, catching dust and dread in equal measure. No return address, just the sharp, blocky stamp of the local bank office. He stared at it over his coffee, over his supper, over nothing. Anne found him still sitting there after sundown, the lantern burning low. You gonna open it? She asked softly, or just keep daring it to disappear? Charlie slid the knife from his belt and sliced it open with one motion. He read, and read again. Then he folded the letter and stared at the flame. Care. Here calling in the note. Anne's face didn't move. How long? 14 days. She stepped closer. Is there anything left to sell? Only thing worth anything's this land, he said, voice low, and they already want that. Silence filled the room. Not heavy, just thick, like the last straw on a pile no one saw stacking up. I'm sorry, she said. Charlie gave a short laugh, bitter as week-old grounds. Ain't your fault. But it felt like it was, all of it. The gold she hadn't mentioned, the truths she'd swallowed, the weight she saw dragging behind his every step. I could leave, she offered. Might ease things. You think that's what's bleeding me dry? He snapped, then then caught himself. No, I don't want you gone. Anne's eyes glistened, but she held steady. Then let me help. He shook his head. Unless you got a miracle tucked in that bag of yours. She didn't speak, didn't nod, just looked down. And for the first time, he could feel it. She was carrying something more than guilt. Anne didn't sleep that night. She paced the dark cabin long after Charlie drifted off in his chair, boots still on, letter clutched in one hand like it might rewrite itself by morning. Her gut twisted. She hadn't told him. Not the whole truth. Not the part that mattered most. The gold. Buried deep in the canyon, hidden where no lawman or outlaw had found it. She'd watched them stash it. Bags of coins, bars wrapped in canvas, things taken in blood and gunfire. They thought she was too broken to remember, too scared to matter. They were wrong. She stepped outside into the cold. Stars burned above the ridge like pinpricks in leather. Her arms folded tight across her chest, like she could hold the secret in if she squeezed hard enough. But it kept clawing up her throat. Come morning, Charlie was splitting kindling when she approached. Hands tight around an empty coffee mug, lips dry as dust. I need to tell you something, she said. He looked up, brows drawn, waited. There's gold, she said, from the gang, buried out past the canyon fork where the rocks fall into shadow. His face didn't move, not at first. How long you known? Since before you found me. He dropped the axe. You were going to keep that secret while the ranch burned down around me? I didn't know what you'd do, she said, voice cracking. If you'd hate me, if you'd turn me in. I was scared I'd lose this, whatever this is. Charlie stared at her like he didn't recognize her at all, then turned and walked back toward the barn, fists clenched. And Anne stood alone, wind whipping her hair, the weight of everything she buried now between them like a grave. Charlie didn't speak to her for the rest of the day. Anne spent it pacing, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, stacking firewood, saddling then unsaddling a horse just to keep her hands moving. Her heart hammered like a nail under pressure. By dusk, she found him at the edge of the west pasture, arms resting on the top rail of the fence. The sun dipped low behind him, casting his face in shadow. You can hate me if you want, she said behind him. Charlie didn't turn. I don't hate you. Could have fooled me. You waited. His voice was hard, flat. Watched me fight tooth and nail to keep this land while you sat on a map to salvation. Anne stepped beside him, eyes locked forward. You think it was that simple? You think this was about gold? He snapped, finally facing her. It was about trust, Anne. You broke it. She took a shaky breath. I didn't tell you because I was scared. Scared of what it meant. Scared you'd take it, and I'd lose you. He shook his head. You never had me. You never gave me the truth long enough to try. That one hit. She turned to go, then stopped. You're right. I should have told you. But that gold's still out there, and it could save this ranch. I didn't want it. Not until I saw what you were losing. Charlie stared at her, eyes colder than the coming night. Show me, he said. Anne blinked. What? You said you know where it is. Then show me. She nodded, slow, but the words stuck like gravel in her throat, because deep down, she knew. Once they dug it up, nothing between them would ever look the same. They rode out before first light. No words. Just breath in the cold air and hooves crunching dry brush beneath them. Anne led, her silhouette cutting a line against the fading stars. Charlie followed, eyes locked on her back like he didn't know whether to trust her or keep her in sight. The canyon stretched wide and silent, the kind of silence that made a man feel watched. They reached a bend where the rocks jutted like jagged teeth, and Anne slowed her horse. Here, she said, voice barely more than wind. Charlie dismounted. So did she. She moved toward a weather-worn oak with its roots snaking over a half-buried crate. She knelt and started digging with her hands. Charlie didn't help. The dirt came up dry and stubborn. Her fingers bled before she hit wood. She pulled the lid back, and the morning sun caught metal. Coins, bars, sacks stamped with railway crests. Charlie stared, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. "You weren't lying," he said. Anne sat back, wiping sweat from her brow with a trembling hand. "I never was." He stepped closer, crouched beside the box, picked up a coin, turned it in his hand. "All this," he muttered, "and you kept it buried." "I kept me buried," she said. Their eyes met, and for the first time since she told him, something shifted in his face. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Charlie stood. "We pack it up, get it back to the ranch, hide it clean." Anne blinked. "You're not turning it in?" "Not yet," he said. "Not until I know who's still out there looking for it." Because deep in his gut, Charlie knew one thing for damn sure. Treasure like this never stayed quiet. And whoever it belonged to wasn't done hunting. Charlie slung the last sack of gold over the mule's back and cinched it tight. The sun had climbed high by then, beating down on the canyon floor like it meant to boil something out of them. Anne sat on a rock, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the shadows shift along the cliffs. "Feels wrong," she said finally, "digging up something like this. Like we called something back by touching it." Charlie didn't answer. He checked the rifle instead, then his saddlebag, then the canteens. Twice. "Paranoid?" she asked, trying to lighten the weight in her chest. He looked at her, eyes sharp. "You ever bury something and feel it watching you?" She went quiet. They rode out slow, the mule trailing behind, gold hidden under canvas and dust. Charlie led this time. Anne followed close, but her neck stayed tight, eyes darting to the hills, scanning every tree line like she felt a breath on her skin. Just before they hit the ridge, the mule spooked. Charlie spun around, hand already on the rifle. Anne was off her horse, crouched low. Then he saw it. A figure on the high bluff, lean, dirty, watching. Charlie raised the rifle but didn't fire. The figure didn't flinch, just turned and vanished behind a boulder. "Someone's out there," Anne said, voice tight. "I saw him." "Who?" Charlie stared at the bluff. Didn't get a name, but he wasn't lost. Anne's face drained. "What?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "He was one of them. One of the gang. I thought he died back at Ashwood." Charlie loaded a round into the chamber. "Guess he didn't." And right then, they both knew. Whatever they'd pulled out of the earth wasn't gold. It was trouble. And it was coming. They made it back to the ranch by dusk. Charlie didn't unsaddle the horses, didn't unload the gold. He just led them straight into the barn and bolted the door behind him. Anne stood in the yard, arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together with nothing but willpower. "He won't stop," she said quietly. Charlie lit the lantern, the flame throwing sharp shadows across the stalls. "Who is he?" "Elias Hearn." The name landed like a rock. "Mean bastard," she continued. "Used to be second in command. Smarter than the rest, colder too. He's the one who used to—" She stopped, her throat tightening. Charlie waited. "He's the one who broke my ribs when I tried to run," she said. "Did it without blinking." Charlie's jaw flexed, but he didn't speak. "I thought he died in the shootout," Anne whispered. "I prayed he did." Charlie checked the rifle again, refilled the lantern, every movement precise. "You think he's here for the gold?" he asked. "No," she said. "He's here for me, and maybe to bury whatever's left of us both." Charlie looked at her for a long time. Then he stepped close enough to see the way her breath hitched when he touched her elbow. "You're not who you were back then," he said. Her eyes flicked to his. "Neither are you." They stood like that, in the barn, with the scent of dust and horses thick in the air. And somewhere out in the dark, Elias Hearn was waiting, watching, because men like that didn't chase gold, they chased ghosts. and Anne had become the one thing he'd never finished. Charlie spotted him just after dawn, a lone figure leaning on the far fence post, calm as a preacher at a picnic. No horse in sight, just a dust-covered coat, a brimmed hat pulled low, and a rifle slung casually over one shoulder. Anne stood on the porch, coffee in hand, staring like she'd seen a ghost. Charlie didn't ask. He grabbed the shotgun from the doorframe and walked slow, boots crunching gravel. "You lost?" Charlie called. The man didn't flinch, didn't move, just raised his head enough to show a scar that cut through his cheek like a whip mark. "Elias Hearn," Charlie muttered. "You must be Charlie," the man drawled. "You're taller than she described." Charlie stopped 10 paces out. "You got a reason for standing on my land?" Elias smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just following the trail of something that belongs to me. Gold's not yours." "I wasn't talking about gold." Behind Charlie, the front door creaked. Anne stepped off the porch, slowly. Charlie held out a hand to stop her, but she kept walking. Elias tipped his hat. "There she is." Anne's face was ice. "You should have stayed dead." "And miss all this?" He grinned, gesturing wide. "You sittin' pretty with a hero and a treasure chest full of second chances?" Charlie's grip tightened on the shotgun. Elias raised both hands, mock innocent. "I ain't here to shoot. Not yet." "You're not leaving with anything," Charlie said flatly. Elias smiled wider. "You sure about that?" Then he turned, calm as can be, and walked back into the trees. Charlie watched until he disappeared. Anne whispered, "He won't go far." Charlie nodded once. "Then we won't either." The knock came that evening. 2 sharp raps on the cabin door. Charlie rose from his chair, shotgun already in hand. Anne stood by the window, her breath held so tight she looked carved from stone. He opened the door slow. Elias stood there, alone, no gun drawn, just that same crooked grin and hands raised like he meant peace. "I didn't come to die today," Elias said. "Just came to talk." Charlie didn't lower the barrel. "Talk fast." Elias stepped inside uninvited. His boots dragged dust in, but neither of them moved to stop him. "I know where the rest of the gold is," he said, eyes cutting to Anne. She stiffened. Charlie glanced at her, then back to Elias. "Go on." "There's a stash you don't know about, buried south of the ridge, hidden before the law got close. I can show you." Anne's voice came low and sharp. "And in return?" Elias turned toward her, expression shifting, almost tender. "My name cleared," he said. "I tell the sheriff what happened, how you were taken, how you never lifted a finger against anyone." Anne blinked, stunned. "Why would you do that?" He chuckled. "Because you were the only good thing in that godforsaken camp, and because I'm tired, sweetheart, real tired." Charlie didn't trust him, not one bit. But Anne saw it, something behind Elias's eyes, regret maybe, or at least a shadow of it. She stepped closer. "You testify?" "I do." Charlie lowered the shotgun a fraction. "Then we ride tomorrow." Elias nodded, then turned to leave. Outside, under the weight of night, he paused and looked back. "Don't think this makes me a good man," he said. "Just means I ain't the worst one no more." And then he disappeared into the dark. They rode out at first light, dust trailing behind like a memory that wouldn't die. Charlie up front. Elias behind him, quiet as a ghost. Anne rode between them, nervous, alert, her hand never far from the pistol tucked under her coat. The hills were quiet. Too quiet. Elias led them south, past dead trees and dry creeks, until the land flattened out into old riverbed. "There," he said, pointing toward a gnarled cottonwood. They dismounted. Elias knelt by the base of the tree and started digging with his hands. No shovel, no hesitation. Anne watched him, arms crossed. "You really buried it here?" He didn't look up. Didn't trust the others, figured if things went bad, and they always do, I'd have a way out. Charlie kept one eye on Elias, the other on the ridge. Something still felt off. Too easy, too smooth. Then Elias hit wood. He pulled back the lid, and there it was. Bars of gold, dull and heavy, wrapped cloth sacks. The real deal. Charlie let out a slow breath. Anne didn't smile. Elias stood slowly. "It's all yours." Charlie raised a brow. "You don't want to cut?" Elias looked out over the land. "What's gold gonna buy a man like me? A bigger hole to die in?" He turned toward Anne. "I'll tell the sheriff the truth, every word." She swallowed hard. "Why now?" Elias hesitated, then, "Because you were the only light in that dark place. And I figure if I can do one right thing before I go, maybe I'll sleep quieter." Charlie stepped forward. "Then let's get moving, before someone less noble decides to follow your trail." They loaded the gold up, and for the first time no one said it, but they all felt it. This ride might just save them all. They were a mile from town when the shot rang out, correct through the canyon like a whip, echoing off stone and bone. Charlie dove from his horse, rifle in hand. Anne hit the dirt beside him, already drawing her pistol. Elias didn't flinch. He just turned slow, eyes searching the high ridge. "Sniper," he muttered. "Sharp one." Another shot cracked, closer this time. It hit the saddle behind Charlie's leg, splintering wood and leather. "Ambush," Anne whispered. Elias scanned the ridge. They waited, knew I'd come back. "Friends of yours?" Charlie asked, eyes sharp. "Used to be," Elias said, tone grim, "until I kept the gold for myself." He turned toward them. "They won't stop. Not for me, not for you." "Then we make our stand here," Charlie said, crouching low behind a fallen log. Anne checked her rounds. One shot at a time. The next 5 minutes were gunfire and dust, yells from the ridge, bullets cracking through brush, screams swallowed by echo. Elias moved like a man who'd seen too much and stopped fearing death. He dropped one of them with a clean shot through the chest. Another came down the hill and took a round from Anne that snapped his leg like a twig. Charlie spotted the last one, hidden high, barely visible between rocks. He breathed, aimed, and pulled. Silence followed. For a long beat, nothing moved. Then Elias staggered, dropped to one knee. Blood bloomed from his side. Anne rushed to him. He looked up at her, grin weak. "Reckon this was always how it ends." "Stay with me," she begged. But his eyes were already dimming. "Tell the sheriff," he rasped. "Tell him I made it right." Then his hand went limp, and Elias Hearn died right there in the dirt, with peace at last in his eyes. The sheriff's office smelled of tobacco and dust. Light streamed through the windows in thin gold lines, slicing the room like truth waiting to be told. Charlie placed a single sack of gold on the desk with a dull thud. Sheriff Harlow looked up, chewing slow on the end of a matchstick. "That what I think it is?" Charlie nodded. "There's more, buried clean, brought enough to get your attention." Harlow opened the sack, his eyebrows raised. "Where'd it come from?" Anne stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled. "From the Ashwood gang. Elias Hearn led us to it." Harlow leaned back in his chair. "Hearn? Thought he was dead." Charlie shook his head. "Not until this morning. Took a bullet saving our hides. Died trying to make things right. the sheriff stared at them for a long moment. Anne reached into her coat and pulled out a letter, signed in Elias's hand, written the night before, a confession, a full account, a line-by-line breakdown of what they stole and what he did. She placed it on the desk. Harlow read the first few lines, exhaled slow. "And you?" Anne stood tall. "I was a prisoner, used for bait. I escaped during the Ashwood shootout. This proves it." The sheriff sat quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for a drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope and slid it across the desk. "What's this?" Charlie asked. "Reward," Harlow said, "for the gold and for putting Hearn's name in the dirt. Dead or alive, he was worth 5,000. Anne's eyes widened. Charlie didn't speak. "Take it," Harlow said. "Buy back your land. Fix what's broke." They left the office in silence. But outside, in the dusty light of town, something settled in Charlie's chest. Not gold, not relief, but something closer to peace. The money was tucked deep in Charlie's saddlebag, but it felt like it weighed less than the truth they'd finally left behind. Wrote quiet. The dust curled behind their horses' hooves, and the late-day sun dipped low, casting their shadows long and thin across the prairie. Anne kept glancing sideways at him, not speaking, just watching, like she was waiting for something to crack. Charlie finally broke the silence. "You think he meant it?" "Elias?" she asked. He nodded. Anne looked out over the land. "I think he wanted to, and for a man like him, that's about as real as it gets." Charlie grunted. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked, softer now. He turned his head. "You mean letting you in, or digging up trouble with a gold heart?" "Either." He pulled the reins, slowing his horse as they neared the crest above the ranch. The roof glinted in the fading light. Their home. "I don't regret you," he said. "I regret not asking sooner." Anne raised a brow. "Asking what?" "If you were staying." The question lingered in the air, bold and naked. She smiled, just barely. "You never asked. You just didn't tell me to leave." They reached the gate. Charlie swung down, opened it, and let her ride in first. "You staying?" he finally asked, standing in the golden dust. Anne looked down at him, sunlight painting her face in something close to hope. "I'm tired of running," she said. "And I like how it feels, not lying." Charlie nodded once. "Then stay." And for the first time in a long while, they both crossed the threshold not as two strangers with wounds, but as two people figuring out how to heal, together. A week passed. The bank sent papers, clean ones this time, the kind that meant ownership, not foreclosure. Charlie signed with steady hands. Anne watched him, her fingers brushing the wood grain of the table like she still couldn't believe it was real. Life hadn't gone quiet. Not really. There were fences to mend, livestock to feed, but the air felt different, less like survival, more like something solid, like roots. Charlie stood at the edge of the south pasture one evening, watching the sun slip behind the ridge. Anne joined him, wiping dust off her sleeves. "You keep staring at that hill like it's gonna move," she said. "Just thinking," he muttered. She raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous habit." He smirked. "About what the land remembers." Anne tilted her head. "Folks like to pretend you can bury things out here," Charlie said. "Secrets, pain, gold. But the dirt don't forget. It just waits." Anne looked out over the pasture, toward the ridge where the ambush had happened. "I think the land remembers how you walk on it," she said. "If you come in peace, or if you come to take." Charlie glanced at her. "And us?" She stepped closer, sliding her hand into his. "I think we gave more than we took." The wind stirred around them, dry, honest, real. He squeezed her hand. You ever think about leaving again? She looked at him like he'd just spoken nonsense. I was lost, she said. Then I found someone who didn't try to fix me, just made space. Charlie didn't answer. He didn't have to. The land around them had been stained with blood, secrets, and sorrow, but it still grew things, still healed, just like them. Charlie found her behind the barn, kneeling by the old oak with her hands deep in the soil, not digging, just feeling. She didn't turn when he walked up. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice low. Anne looked back at him, hair wild in the breeze. "Making peace." He crouched beside her, knees popping like old hinges. "With the dirt?" "With what I left in it," she said. They sat like that, quiet, the way only folks who've lived through something can be. "I kept thinking," she said finally, "about all that gold, all that death tied to it. And I couldn't stop wondering, what if we hadn't gone back?" Charlie picked up a pebble, rolled it between his fingers. Would have lost the ranch, and maybe never known each other. He nodded. We'd still be two ghosts looking for something that wasn't never buried in the first place. Anne smiled, sad and sure. Turns out we were the treasure. Charlie laughed, rough and quiet. "You getting poetic on me now?" "Only a little," she said. He took her hand. No tension, no hesitation. "You think the past ever lets go?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I think it stops chasing you when you stop running." The wind kicked up, carrying the dust into the air, soft, golden, blinding for a breath. And in that dust, all the pain, all the fear, all the secrets they'd carried. They didn't disappear, but they settled. Anne leaned into him. "So what now?" Charlie looked toward the horizon. "We build, we breathe, we love. And if trouble comes?" He kissed her temple just once. "Then we bury it in the dust." And they stood there, sun on their backs, hearts finally unburdened. Not by what they found, but by what they chose to let go. If this story pulled at your heart like it did ours, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to SaddleHorn Stories. We've got more grit, romance, and raw Western tales where this came from. Don't miss the next chapter in our frontier of storytelling. If you were Charlie, would you have trusted Anne? Let's hear your take. Was she brave or just lucky? Drop your thoughts below and ride with us every week for more SaddleHorn stories.